Right. So look, let's start with the AFC. So at some point during this off season, we will probably do an individual episode on each various division. Okay. But I think what we want to do today is we just want to go through each one and not just give a single name because that's not going to be a huge amount of content. But it's just basically give our way too early prediction on who do we think could win. And once we've done all of the divisions, what I might quickly ask for you, Eddie, is who do you think your dark horse could be in that entire conference? Not through each individual division, just a conference. So let's get into it. And we'll start with the AFC East, just to make me a little bit depressed. So, just recaps, who was in the AFC? We've got the Buffalo Bills, who won the division last season with a 13-4 record. Second place last year was my Miami Dolphins, who were 8-9. And then we had the Jets, who came third with 5-12. And then the New England Patriots, who brought up the rear last season with a 4-13 record. So, Eddie, we touched on this a little bit last week. As much as it pains me to say, this is still feels to me like a one team division, I should say, in the Buffalo Bills. Um, May as well get it out. That's who I think are going to win. Who I think are going to win the division, because I kind of have to say that.
Just
But do you think anything different? What's your thoughts going into this one?
I mean, I do have other things to you know, to raise to you because this division, right? And I know it's a little bit close to home because your favorite team is in there. But I think you can make a case, for a lot of other teams in this division. You can certainly make a case for the Patriots, right? So you look at, the Patriots, how they finished last season. And they've got a new coach who everyone believes that is an absolutely, good coach, Mike Vrabel, who's gone in there. You've got a quarterback that, Drake May, who started to show signs of overcoming, what happens to rookies, just getting into the pace of the NFL, understanding the NFL playbook, understanding what it means to quarterback in the NFL, being a leader across the entire roster. So you have that going. And, normally when, a rookie gets a good coach, sometimes that actually gives that rookie a great jump, right, in the next season. And you saw that happen to Jared Goff. He was absolutely, I think people were calling him a bust, at the time. And then in comes Sean McVay. And then next thing you know, we're talking about him showing up in the Super Bowl. So you kind of look at that and you say, well, the New England Patriots, and people are not going to be playing them with their best, right? People are going to be looking at the New England Patriots and thinking, you guys were not up to any good last season. So, and they might underestimate them and they might catch a few teams cold, this season. So you could make a case for the New England Patriots. And then you turn around and you look at the Jets. The Jets have just gotten a defensive coordinator from the Lions. Now, everyone knows how the Lions performed, last season. They were basically the Harlem Trotters, of NFL last season, spanking people 40 something. Even my poor Cowboys got some love from the Lions last season, some tough love from the Lions last season. So you would think and you say the Jets, sometimes you could become great by subtracting, right? They could be addition by subtraction. And the Jets may argue that by losing, Aaron Rodgers, they actually became better. You could look at now it's a collection of a sum of all the parts rather than just one big part, in the team. And they always had a good defense because remember what everyone said when Aaron Rodgers went there, that all they were missing was a quarterback. They had the makings of a good team, in there. They had some good wide receivers. They had Breece Hall, who was running, the running back, at the time. And it was like, look at the Jets, they had, obviously now he's gotten traded, to the Steelers. But you had, a cornerstone cornerback, there who's potentially, always in the, all pro every conversation every season. So the Jets, look like a formidable team. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers happened and things look quite different. And then, of course, we talk about your Dolphins, right? The Dolphins, when Tua is healthy, they are a considerable force. You've got Jalen Waddle there. You've got Tyreek Hill. I know that you've lost Laramie Tunsil, who's gone off, and he was a good left tackle. So you might wonder, how that O-line shapes up. But, you know, Miami have always played well in the regular season. So I say all that to say that it's probably not a foregone conclusion to think that there will be people that will challenge the Bills, this season. I don't think that they're just going to walk that league, that division and just rump everyone through. I expect that, there are going to be some blows traded there. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins, are not pushing the Bills really hard this season.
I would be. Well, let's look at some of the sort of the tail of the tape a little bit in terms of last year. Looking at some of the stats from last year, I mean, the Bills' home record was something else. Bills won every single home game.
Yeah.
Let's see, they were 8-0 at home and 5-4 away. So if we stick with them first, they won 5 out of the 6 divisional games that they had. So they were clearly the superior team. They've got one of, if not the best quarterback in the league. Um, but you can see that with the points that they got. Got
Mm,
a 525 points over the course of the season, a net point score of 157. They were clear and away the best team, and I fully expect them to be the best team this season. The
yeah.
Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots, they are playing for second place, but there's nothing to say that they can't make the wild card, right? There's no reason to say they can't get into the playoffs. Challenging for that first position is going to be incredibly difficult. And if we look at the betting odds for it, now neither you or I are big gamblers, but I think the betting odds is a really good benchmark just to see where people think that they are. They've actually got Buffalo as odds on to take the division,
Yeah.
unsurprisingly. But then second favourites are actually the Patriots. The Patriots are pretty much 5-1 to win the division, with Miami at 7-1, and then the Jets at 14. So much more favourite. I mean, that's me translating it into English betting odds. If we look at the American betting odds, yeah, the Patriots are plus 500, so 5 times likely to win.
Yeah.
Miami 700 and the Jets 1400. So they see that it's pretty much going to be a one-team league, a one-team division, with New England are the ones who are potentially pushing them onwards. So with all that being said, I've stuck my cause to the mast. I think it's Buffalo's there, pretty much without too much drama. Who would you see then? Give us your one
So
word answer.
listen, I would say the Bills, but just. I would say
Bills,
the
but
Bills,
just.
but just. I would not be surprised if the Dolphins. And just one more thing, last season, those two teams played each other incredibly close. I think the game in November, it was 3 points that separated the Bills and the Dolphins. Tua played well in that game. I know the first game was a little bit of a whitewash, but actually both Josh Allen and Tua didn't particularly play well, in that game. I think um, Josh Allen had one touchdown in that game, even though they won by 20 something odd points. But a lot of those touchdowns were running touchdowns. I mean, Bills ran the ball, a lot in that first game, which is what helped them to win. But like I say, it's Bills, but only just.
Okay, well, I am making notes on this, by the way, anyway. So we're going to see who when we shape up at the end of the division, when we end up at the end of the regular season, and we'll look back at our way too early predictions. We will see. Okay, well, let's move on to the AFC North. AFC North, of course, includes the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cleveland Browns. Now, last season we actually had 3 teams with a winning record,
Yeah.
with the Ravens 12-5, Steelers 10-7, Bengals 9-8, and with the Cleveland Browns being the also rans with 3-14. Now, 2 teams actually made the playoffs. So Ravens won the league, Steelers got into a wild card spot. This one is going to be a little. This one I think is more difficult to call. I think obviously Ravens again, similar to what we're talking about with Buffalo, have one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the division. Steelers have obviously made yeah, make that big trade by bringing in Aaron Rodgers, as we've talked about quite a bit over the past couple of weeks. But Bengals have, again, one of the elite level quarterbacks in Joe Burrows, and the Browns are also there. So, Eddie, how do you see it? How do you see it shaping up?
Okay, so let's start by the Browns. And that's all we're gonna say about
Moving
the
on.
Browns.
Yes, moving on. Yes.
So we move on. Um, Now let's look at the Steelers, right? I think there's a lot of fascination, to see how the Steelers are gonna look with Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf. I think there's a lot of people who are looking at the Steelers and thinking, is there a making of something in there with Mike Tomlin, calling the shots, a Super Bowl winning coach? So I don't know. I want to see the Steelers. I want to see them in a preseason game. I want to see them, with all of these elements together because, chemistry is a thing, right? So it looked like Aaron Rodgers had absolutely the opposite of chemistry in Jets. So you wonder whether that is going to be something that they have. And if they get chemistry, the Steelers could, they could be second. And the reason why I say this is because the Bengals are doing Bengals things, right? They still haven't sorted their players. Trey Hendrickson still hasn't gotten paid. You've got a rookie that you've drafted in your first round. You still haven't gotten that one paid as well. So you're looking at potentially starting the season with a handicap, right? And we know that. I was looking at the stats, and he said Joe Burrow is 1-9 in his first two games since he came into the league.
Wow.
And that is
Fast starters.
that's just crazy, right? And so if the Bengals can just not get in their way, then you think, I mean, it was crazy because last season, we were talking about this a lot. The Bengals were scoring 30 points and losing a game. So that tells you that their defense were the ones that were letting them down. And that's the part of the field that you expect that they should have strengthened this season, and they're not paying the right talent. So that's what's making me worry about the Bengals. And the Steelers could match in and still, pardon the pun, but that actually worked quite well. The Steelers could actually go in and steal that second position. Obviously, the big daddy is the Ravens, right? The Ravens make that division a cage fight. They are the ones that everyone is looking up to. They're at a standard. You've got Lamar, Action Jackson. You've got King Henry there. You've got a defense that, at times, we're playing lights out last season. Now, teams rarely just carry over their form, right? There's always a little bit of adjustments, teams go and study. And this is the thing, right? When you have good coaches within a division, it doesn't take long before they start working each other out. They start to buy or draft players specifically for their division because you don't get into the playoffs unless you get out of your division. So your number one task, forget everybody else, but get out of your division. But having said all that, um, if everything goes well, I want to go with the Bengals because the Bengals, for me, have got the offensive power to actually match the Ravens. But I don't say that with a lot of conviction because of everything that I've said about the Bengals, not getting in their own way, not starting fast, but they always pull the results in towards the last run in the season. So can they start fast? All I ask for them, don't start 0-3, right, in your
Yeah.
first three games. Just give me 2 wins. If you can give me 2 wins, we could be in business.
I will say that the AFC North is certainly one of the tightest divisions, just because obviously how often they play each other. Now, obviously, again, for people who don't know, that in a season, in a regular season, you play each team in your division twice. Now, again, looking at last season, interdivisional record was very close.
Mm.
So Ravens were 4-2,
Right.
Steelers and Bengals were both 3-3, and Browns were 2-4. So we've dismissed Browns, and rightfully so, but they still picked up
And
two
two
victories.
wins. They
Yeah,
did.
within the division. So it was a lot tighter. And obviously Ravens just did incredibly well with other teams in their conference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like a one-game swing, literally.
it is. And so I think a lot will depend on how if you can end the season with 4 wins in your conference or 5 wins in your conference. Well, we'll see this when we look at some of the other conferences as we go through this. Excuse me. that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
The Browns, for example, could really throw a spanner in the works if they manage to eke out a victory over the Ravens. And that could be the difference between, topping the division and being a
Yeah.
high seed going into the playoffs,
Yeah.
or scraping into wild card and having to play, say, for example, the Bills or the Chiefs, right, in the playoffs. So that can make a big difference. And I mean, I like the idea of the Bengals winning. I do, but I just think the Ravens are going to be too strong, and the Steelers always get an invitation to the party, don't they?
They
And
do.
they always do. And you know, last season they weren't great, 10 wins. Yeah, they had a net point of 33. I mean, but they've got Aaron Rodgers there. You could argue they may be a better team this season, but it is really a do or die season for them because they are, as we said before, Rodgers isn't here for a long time. He's here for a fun time, isn't he? You know what I mean? So
Yes.
if it could go all crashing down around the Steelers this year, or they'll probably just do enough and do. I mean, we could be in a situation like we saw in the NFC in one of the NFC divisions last season, where three teams make the playoffs. I
Yeah.
can't see that happening. So there's a chance the Bengals might just miss out, and if they start slowly, as you've mentioned, they could be in trouble. So let's just quickly look at the odds before we move on. So again, I don't know when these odds were taken. I don't know if these are live odds or if they were done maybe before Aaron Rodgers signed. But you've got the Ravens are the odds on favorite minus 145. Second favorite are the Bengals actually at plus 225, and Pittsburgh plus 550. Right, so the odds are telling us that the Ravens are still the favourites.
Yeah.
Bengals are the ones who are more likely to push second place. And again, the Browns at plus 3,000 are also there too. That's pretty much what we can say about the Cleveland Browns. So you're going for Bengals. I'm going to stick with the Ravens. I just think, yeah, I think they're going to struggle to. Whoever comes above the Ravens is going to win the division. Put it that way, as we say. So let's move on then to the AFC South. So if I get everything
Yeah.
up, so AFC South includes the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tennessee Titans. Last season, only one team made it through to the playoffs, which was the Houston Texans. They ended the season with a 10-7 record. Every other team in that division, similar to what we were talking about the East, all had a losing record. Colts were 8-9, Jaguars 4-13, and the Titans 3-14. So there was only really one team in it, but it wasn't the best division last season, was it? And just talking about the divisional stuff, yeah, going to looking at the last one, the Texans were 5-1 for divisional games.
Mm.
Titans were 1-5. So that was one of the things. That was probably the reason why they were able to get there against non-conference teams. They had a losing record of 2-3. So
Yeah.
so yeah, how do you see the AFC South shaping up this year?
Um, it really boils down to Cam Ward, right? Because I think the Titans could be really frisky if Cam Ward starts hot, right? So I know a lot of people are not talking a lot about the Titans, and for good reason. When you have a record, that there is a reason why you pick number one overall, and it's not for good behavior or for stellar accomplishments. You certainly pick number one overall in the draft because you've been awful in the season before, and no one else could wrestle the bottom position from you, which is what the Titans did pretty much throughout the whole of last season. So Cam Ward could make the difference. And I can only think about what the Bengals were before Joe Burrow showed up. They could be that kind of turnaround because I mean that division, you kind of look at it and say you've got one team that's probably the standouts in the class, and then everybody else you just don't know what side of the morning they're waking up to, right? So I look at the Titans and I think, if Cam Ward starts hot, we could be having a conversation. And then you go to the Colts. The Colts have just had, all kinds of unfortunate, you know, incidents with their quarterbacks, right? It's been, you draft a quarterback and you think that he's the one that's going to do it, and he gets injured. And then you almost, because the Colts were looking like a decent team a couple of years ago. And then they just sort of plummeted, right? So you've got Daniel Jones, I believe is now in the Colts, from the Giants. So, he's a decent starter, especially when you look at the division and you think about the quarterbacks that are there. You've got a Titans rookie quarterback. You've got Trevor Lawrence, who has not really, really, performed, up to the expectation of a number one overall and draft pick. And then you've got, what's his name now? I've just forgotten his name. The Texans quarterback. Um, what's his name now? Who went through his sophomore slump, after having an unbelievable
CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud, of course, CJ Stroud, who had an incredible rookie season and then went through a sophomore slump last season. So now everyone is going to be looking at him and saying, can you bounce back, right? Can you actually, go back to probably what you were doing in your first year? So you look at all of those teams and you say it could be anybody's league. Now, D'Amico Ryan is a good coach. He's shown that, and that he's a good coach. So you always look at the Texans and, excuse me, you always look at the Texans and you think, they can do the business. But honestly, I don't want to discount Trevor Lawrence. I don't. Um, Only because he's had so many coaches in the last couple of years, and he's got a new coach again this season. So it brings a bit of unpredictability, to the Jaguars. And don't also forget that they've got an absolute weapon in Travis Hunter, right? We're going to talk about him in another segment. But he could bring spark life into that team. So do you know what? I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm gonna go with the Jaguars, right? I'm gonna go with the Jaguars. I'm gonna go with Trevor Lawrence, to fulfill his potential. And we know that Travis Hunter is gonna be balling, right? And I think he could be the spark that actually allows them to be decent in a division. I don't know what about the South divisions, but he could make that division a bit exciting and something to talk about.
Yeah, I think this one's a tough call, and I think the odds sort of stack sort of stack that up as well. Looking at the odds, there is no odds on favorite in this division. Right, so everything we've looked at so far, you have like minus odds for
Yeah,
Baltimore, you have minus odds for Bills. I mean, Houston, Texas are the favorite, but they've got plus 100, right?
yeah,
Plus 300 for Jacksonville, plus 350 for the Colts, plus 750 for Tennessee. I don't see Tennessee. I think it's too much pressure to put on Cam Ward. I don't think they've got enough around him yet to really see that they can push. But given your point, if he starts well, it's not a particularly strong division.
yeah,
So there is the option of anybody breaking out and taking this division. I really see your point about Jacksonville. I just don't think they've particularly had a good enough team around the quarterback, just to help him really fulfill his potential. He's had a couple injuries as well. Could this be his year? I think, to be fair, it has to be their year soon, doesn't it? To be honest, and the quarterback name, it escapes me. You've just been saying it. What's the quarterback's name at Jacksonville?
Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence. Thank you. Lovely set of hair. Lovely head of hair. So I think he's a franchise quarterback for them, but he's got to start showing something soon.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I can see him being one of these franchise quarterbacks that gets passed around
Mm.
in the next couple of years. And does he end up somewhere else? To Jacksonville cut their losses, free up the cap space, and does he go to somewhere else to be a starting quarterback? Somewhere further down the line, who knows, right? I mean, the Cleveland Browns don't have that many quarterbacks. Maybe he can just go there. um, so yeah. I mean, I'm gonna stick with Houston on this because
Yeah.
Stroud, you're right, didn't have a great second season, but he's still probably the best quarterback in that
Quarterback
division.
in that division. Yeah.
Depending on how Cam Ward gets on, as you said. But let's keep this rolling as my
Okay.
video goes fuzzy, and I'll just turn that off and turn it on again. So let's go on to the AFC West. So
Ooh,
the AFC West. This
I
should
like
be
this one.
yeah, this should be fairly short. So we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, we have the LA Chargers, and we have the Denver Broncos and the Las Vegas Raiders. Chiefs won this division last season. It felt pretty much at a canter. They won it with a 15-2 record. Um, you know, as we said last week, they 1-0 to the Arsenal all the way through that division. But then you also had Chargers and the Broncos, both with winning records and both making the playoffs. So again, you had three teams making the playoffs last season. Chargers with 11-6 record, Broncos and were 10-7, and the Las Vegas Raiders were very much the also rans in this division, coming bottom with a record of 4-13. Now, this is an interesting one, I think, because we're talking about who's going to win the division.
Yeah,
We're not talking about dark horses.
yeah.
I'm sure there are cases to be made for the Chargers and the Broncos. Both had fantastic seasons last season, but surely it's still going to be the Chiefs. Can you convince me else? Can you convince me otherwise?
Um, I'm gonna try. Um, I look at that division and it's not the strongest division in the league, right? I think the North on both sides of the aisle will probably be, vying for the title. But I think if there is a division that is very close, to being a very unpredictable division, is also the AFC West. Now, this is a division that the Chiefs have had their way with. Um, they literally, at the start of school, they stand at the assembly and take everyone's lunch boxes. And we're like, that's it. I'm having that. What have you got? You've got some sandwiches. I'll have that. Have you got some Capri Sun? Yeah, I'll take that too as well. What else have you got? Oh, I see you've got some carrots. Actually, no, we don't eat carrots. We do. You can have that. The Chiefs have literally been the school bully in this division. No matter how they look, right? They can look awful, they can look terrible, but we all know at the end of the day, one team is going to be standing on the podium, smiling at everybody else, and people are going to be looking up at them and thinking, "How the heck did they do that?" So it is the Chiefs division. It's very hard to make a case. However, having said that, look at the Broncos, right? Look at what they did last season. Bo Nix came into the league very, very comfortable. Now, as I say this, I am a believer in the sophomore slump, right? I think that, every quarterback experiences it unless you're Patrick Mahomes. It just happens because coaches, they watch you, and you're a rookie, you come into the league and you think, oh, this league is so easy. Imagine how easy it was to just come in, settle in, you're ripping out touchdowns, and all of that. And then you go into the offseason and thinking that the league haven't been studying up all night, to pass the test that you think that you've just aced the season. So I think that would happen to Bo Nix, but I think Sean Payton will be there to guide him. The Broncos always play the Chiefs very hard. So can they take, wins off them? I think they can. And then you've got the Chargers, right? It's time that Justin Herbert started to show with all the potential that everybody talks. Every time they do a top 10 quarterback, he's in there. And the dude hasn't ever even won one playoff game, right? I don't even know if he's been to the playoffs. I know he had 11-6, so you would say he should have been in the playoffs, but I don't know. Were they in the playoffs last season? They were. The Chargers did get to the playoffs, but if no one won a playoff game, he hasn't won a playoff game, right? But every time they're reeling out the top 10 quarterbacks, his name is in there. Even higher than, I was looking at an ESPN ranking today, and they had him, higher than Jalen Hurts, who I don't necessarily like, but they had him higher than Jalen Hurts, who's won a Super Bowl, who's been a Super Bowl MVP, who's also had a nomination to be an All Pro, but they had Justin Herbert higher than him. So you look at all of that and you say, I think it's high time that the Chargers, actually started to do something and make some noise in that division. So for me, if the Chiefs slip up, I think that the Chargers or the Broncos are more than ready to take up the throne in that division. But I'm not a mad person. I'm going to go with the Chiefs. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, sorry, my spoiler alerts. I mean, it's the Chiefs. I mean, look, this is gonna be a close run, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers and the Broncos both got into the playoffs last season. I think the Broncos are going to do very well if they do. Sophomore slump, it is a real thing. You mentioned Patrick Mahomes didn't have a sophomore slump. To be fair to Patrick Mahomes, he didn't really play in his rookie season.
True.
So, Bo Nix, for example, was thrown into it. Mahomes watched from the bench for the first
Yeah, Alex
his
Smith was
first season.
playing in his first season. Yeah.
Exactly. And that, for me, that's the way, it should be. But, try and hold try and hold the expectation back from some of these on these rookie QBs. But anyway, we're not going to have that conversation today. We've already been talking for 45 minutes, it feels like, on part one. So yeah, look, I'm going for Chiefs. I think Chargers and the Broncos could do it, but yeah, this will be Chiefs. I think I can see the Chiefs doing very similar to last season. Their record of 15-2. They were 5-1 in their division. They were 8-0 at home. Only lost, as I said, the two games they lost were on the road. But the interesting thing about the Chiefs last season is they won 15 games. Their net points 59. Right. Now the Chargers' net points were 101 and the Broncos were 114.
Yeah.
So they literally, as I said, they did 1-0 to the Arsenal throughout the entire season. Only from what I can see as a quick flick through, the only team who topped their division who had, oh no, there were two. There were two teams who had a worse points differential than them. It was the Houston Texans, who points differential was nil, and then there was the LA Rams, who actually had -19, which is some going because they managed to win the league. But yeah, look, the Chiefs will just get it done. They'll make the playoffs. They had a team to beat. The odds bear that out as well. I'll quickly talk about the odds. Kansas City odds on -120, Chargers +300. Denver +325 and the Raiders +1500. So I think we're both going to go for the Chiefs. But because this part has already been pretty long, I just want to quickly ask you for a one word. We've given our 4 winners for each one. So just to recap, you went for the Bills, you've gone for the Bengals, you've gone for the Jags, and you've also gone for the Chiefs. Give me one dark horse who you haven't named as a winner. Who do you think could go through in any division?
If I look at this, right, I look at this and I say my dark horse is the Patriots.
Excellent.
I think the Patriots, they've got that sneaky feeling like, don't forget about us. We used to be great.
Well, same division. My dark horse is the Bengals, though. So excellent. So look, let's call part one there, because it feels like we've been talking for about 3 hours already. We will be back in part two to go through exactly the same thing, but in the NFC. Now, we'll try and keep this part two down a little bit, but keep in mind, this is the Dallas Cowboys conference. So Eddie will probably talk for half an hour on the Cowboys as it is. So do you agree with us on our picks for the AFC? Let us know in the comments, all that kind of fun stuff, and we'll see you back for part two.
Thank you for tuning to this episode of Across the Gridiron.
So for more NFL related news, insights, and somewhat outlandish Cowboys opinion and rants, please leave a comment or hit like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification button so you never miss a video of any of our nonsense.
And we'll be back soon at Across the Gridiron.